Does traditional education deliver or fall short in educating and nurturing children? Introducing Aligned Learning Revolution, the show that confronts conventional norms and presents dynamic alternatives to transform education. Host Kohila Sivas tackles the foundational issues within classroom walls and advocates for holistic learning opportunities. It's time to reveal the strength of the innovative holistic NeuroGrowth learning approach that goes beyond conventional teaching or tutoring methods, assuring every learner of a stress-free learning journey to unlock their fullest potential. Now, join Kohila Sivas.
Hello and welcome to this episode. I am truly excited to introduce our special guest, Kat Páez Douce. She is not a typical educator. She is a certified holistic neurogrowth learning success coach with the passion for helping students thrive. She is the founder of Elevate Language and Culture Coaching Practice. Kat specializes in teaching languages with the particular emphasis on Spanish, French, and English as a second language. Her expertise in language instruction is complemented by her holistic and neurogrowth-based approach, which helps students not only become proficient in these languages, but also foster their cognitive and personal development. Kat's unique teaching methods aim to create well-rounded, confident, culturally aware language learners, making her a valuable resource for students seeking a deeper and more enriching language learning experience. So let's welcome our guest, Kat, today. Kat, thank you for joining us on this episode. So let's welcome our guest, Kat, today to our show. Thank you, Kat, for joining us. How are you today?
I'm fine. How are you, Kohila?
Very good. You are currently in France.
I am.
Yes. So how are you enjoying France?
I love France. This is where I built my home, and so I love being in my house. It's we're in the countryside, so I'm surrounded by vineyards and really very nature oriented out here. So
that's awesome. Awesome. So Kat, before this, you were in the United States and you were a language teacher. So tell me a little bit about what made you want to leave the teaching in the US.
Well, yeah, I originally started teaching in the United States for I was about 8 years teaching in the United States before I met my husband and moved to France. And then as my children grew older and they were bilingual, we moved back to the United States so they could continue to do some their education in the US for a little bit. And I went back to teaching, and it was already different from when I started teaching at the beginning. I noticed that there were a lot more restrictions as to how I could teach the content, and a lot more restrictions or demands on the teaching time. So I felt like I wasn't being trusted with the work that I was doing. And I don't feel like it was just me. I think that it was a blanket for all the teachers. All the teachers had to prove what they were doing in the classroom was effective, et cetera. And so that takes away time from the planning and the time that I can spend with students individually or as a group. So that was very frustrating for me. One, not feeling like I was trusted, and secondly, not being able to spend the quality time that I wanted with the students because I had to fulfill this kind of admin situation.
So let me ask you a little bit about that. So when you're not trusted in a classroom environment, that's by the administrators, right? So
I think,
it's by the administrators. Yes, just because so parents can understand what teachers go through, because parents don't see your side many times, right? They just see what's happening outside of the classroom. So when you're there and you have this, as you said, they throw a blanket over you and they expect you to do certain things certain ways. Now you're saying that takes your time away from the students. So can you explain a little bit so parents can understand what a teacher actually goes through?
Certainly. Well, I think it's more as they want to try to hold teachers more accountable for the educating of the different students, and are they learning? Are they moving ahead? Is there growth happening? They implement something for all teachers to have to fill out. They have to do certain assessments. They have to then show that the students are in fact growing, and they have to say what they're going to do differently if there are situations in which the students are not learning. And so all that for all teachers takes an enormous amount of time away from planning, away from feedback, away from spending time with the students. And so I feel like administrators have to implement what the district or the school board has decided that all teachers must do. And I think that parents don't realize how much time we have to actually spend on assessing children. And sometimes we have to build assessments that don't necessarily show what students can and can't do, but we have to show a piece of paper, et cetera. So it's a lot of accountability on the time of teachers, right?
Yeah, a lot of grading, lots of fact collecting.
Yeah, it's mostly fact collecting, yeah. And fact collecting can't really be done in just one way, right? And especially with languages. So especially with languages, there are many ways in which a student can communicate, and maybe they're not going to do it with a multiple choice test, or maybe their reading is not as good as a production. And so these factors are not put into place, but we have to come up with an assessment for the department, for 3 or 4 teachers that have to do the same assessment. So it's time consuming to come up with these assessments, to then grade them, then to meet as teachers, to come up with solutions for those things. And although I do believe that teachers do need to assess students as they grow, as they go, not necessarily with tests, make sure that there is growth happening, I think that there has to be a sense of trust in the teachers to be able to do that organically, right? And in the classroom.
Yes. And also, I think what that takes away is the relationship that you can build with the students, because you're not focused on marking and grading.
Right.
Yeah. Where you can spend all that time building relationship as well. So, it wasn't working for you in the classroom, as you just mentioned, but you have a very close attachment to these languages that you actually coach now, which is Spanish and French. So tell me a little bit about your background. How did you got into teaching languages?
Well, I am Mexican American. I was born in Mexico. My mother is American, and so I was raised bilingual. In Mexico, I attended an American school, which means that I went to the school and half a day was in Spanish, half a day was in English. So when we moved back to the US, I was 15 and I didn't have an accent, and I was able to go right into education in the United States. But I realized that the United States had a predisposed idea of what a Mexican is. And I wanted to fight that in some sense. I arrived in Mexico and in the United States, and people would say, well, why do you keep saying that you're Mexican? You could pass as an American. Why don't you just say that you're American and say that it wasn't your fault that you lived in Mexico? So it really denied my identity. And I thought, well, that's ridiculous, And so I thought that I wanted to change that. I wanted to, one, empower Mexicans, Hispanics, Latins, and in general in the United States. And secondly, I wanted to give a different opinion or vision of what Latins do in the United States. And a Latin, can be white and can be a teacher and can be a professional and so forth. So that was important for me. And I wanted to share my culture. I wanted to share my identity with others. But then I started learning French in college, and then I traveled in France. And of course, France now is where I live. So that's, one is who I am, and the other one is what I love, right? So I love teaching both of those languages. And I think the biggest thing for me, before they can learn to communicate in a language, is to have students get that feeling of loving the culture, wanting to speak it, of recognizing, the people and the different things in the country themselves. So I think for me, it's very passionate, right?
Yeah, it's rooted in your culture and your upbringing. And I love that how you shared that, because a lot of us, as because the show is for parents, when we're growing up with differences, sometimes we hide our identity. We learn to hide in places, right? When we get made fun, or when people ask, sometimes silly questions, we hide. But you, instead of hiding, you pushed forward and you said, this is me.
Right.
I'm going to become a teacher who's going to teach that, and you're going to learn the culture properly, because every culture has beautiful parts of it, parts of the culture that we don't understand. And, through your, way of coaching, you're sharing that passion as well. Yeah.
And I think that it's also needs to be humor, right? So there's a lot of humor usually involved in the silly kind of mistakes that we can make, and that those kinds of things are funny, and we need to be able to laugh at ourselves when we're learning, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So what was your, I guess, greatest frustration? You shared us with one, because I'm trying to get parents to understand the frustrations that teachers face inside the classroom walls. So one of them is this blanket, deliver curriculum and test everyone out and, give me data, right? Because that's how we decide what's working and not working. But what else was your struggle as a teacher in the classroom?
I think another thing that was a struggle for me was not being able to move through the curriculum as I wanted to give the kind of time and differentiation that I needed for different students, to have to be at a certain place always with all kids. So in the school, I had to kind of work creative ways of allowing students to learn at their own pace and grow at their own pace. And so it wasn't very appreciated at times, or by all my staff members, because everybody, if I do something, then other teachers feel like they have to offer the same kind of thing. And so then there's this kind of ill feeling inside the staff, right? But for me, anytime that there was an assessment or anytime that there was a quiz, because we have to have those, right? And I realized that a student doesn't know it then, I always allowed students to retake a test or do it again once they get it, because one student might not get it for another 2 weeks, but it doesn't mean that they don't get it. So they're tied to this grade. And so I would allow for them to, oh, hey, now that you get it, do you want to take that quiz again so that we can bring that grade up again? Because that's the grades are what really matters, right? For the parents, for the student, obviously. But I always have more of a growth mindset. And so I want to be able to differentiate and go at the pace of the student and at the pace that they're learning, because if we move too fast, then they just feel like they just want to give up, right?
What would be a tip that you could give a parent who is watching this show now? They can tell their, student learning, their child learning another language, Spanish or French. We'll stick to those two. What can you tell them to tell their students about learning in the classroom?
Well, in terms of learning a language, I think that it's really important for the parents to become involved in the learning with their kids. So, many times parents will tell me, well, I just can't help them because I don't know Spanish or I don't know French. But that would be a great thing if they would get involved with that when they are learning, right? So at the beginning of the school year or at the beginning of them learning the language, it would be interesting to say, hey, how about we sit down and you can show me some things that let's grab some Post-its and let's just label everything in the house. We're just going to put a Post-it on the door that says puerta or porte, and then put another Post-it on the refrigerator and a Post-it on the window and a Post-it, and just post it everywhere so that the kid, the student, and the parents can always visualize the word. And so they're learning together, right? Or, make them the teacher and teach me what you learned at school. I mean, how do you say this? And oh, you learned how to say I like. Well, great. Now, so can I say I like, I like the cat, I like the food, and so forth. So the idea of allowing them to teach their parents is really, really, really a strong suit for kids.
Yeah, it's a good way to start a conversation with your child at home, right? So how about if they're teenagers? Would this work for them, or would they just shut down and say, don't ask mom, I didn't learn anything? Sometimes teenagers tend to say.
Well, for teenagers, I think, yes, it definitely works for teenagers, but it's true that teenagers kind of want to have their own space, right? So it's important, I think, even outside of learning languages, in order for getting teenagers to share with us, it's really important that they are able to maintain that connection with them. And so a really great way to do that is through efficient communication, right? And especially nonviolent communication is called nonviolent communication. And a strategy to use with that is that with the adolescent children is to make time for open conversation, like going for a walk or for a coffee break with them. And but it's really important that that the parents check their intention, because the intent is to build and nurture the connection and build and nurture that communication, so that when they do sit down and ask them, hey, why don't you show me something? then there's already kind of a basis for that, right? So they check their intentions before having this conversation so that they realize, okay, I'm not going to talk about how I school. I'm not going to talk about the chores that I want done or didn't get done, or I'm going to be an active listener. And so when they go with this intention of being an active listener, then they start building a foundation of trust and empathy, where they listen to each other and they acknowledge and validate each other's feelings. And so in that same sense, you're giving the autonomy and empowering the students and the teenagers. And when you build this open communication and this trust communication, there's not the leave me alone kind of thing. There's another time to just talk, right?
And also, I think leave me alone is just a wall that they start putting up as they reach that age level. But if you keep pushing it, they'll never have the chance to build it, right? Keep pushing forward and asking them, I do still need time with you because you're still my son or daughter. I still want to talk to you because I still care what happened in your day. So if you keep showing that you care about their day, they will never have the opportunity to build a big wall.
Right. I think it's they're wanting to see if that wall is gonna stick, right? So I do believe that they need time to themselves, but most of the time it's are they gonna follow me? Are they really interested in what I'm doing? Are they, and so that it's kind of like a little bit of a test. You have to kind of push through a little.
Yeah, absolutely. With my family, because we're learning Spanish right now, we are watching movies subtitled. I don't know any Spanish at all. My son's pretty good now. By now, he's doing well. So that's another strategy, right? To watch something with them as they grow older. It's another way, because even if you don't have anything that you can connect, because teenagers tend to shut down, right? If it's not interest to them. But if you had watched something or read something together, then you have a content to have a conversation around it.
Yeah, I often tell parents that, especially now with Netflix and other things like that, they can choose to watch a show together. I have one family where they have picked a series. And so twice a week, they watch their series. In this case, it's in French. And so they watch the series in French, and it brings them together, right? Even though it is more difficult for one than it is for the other, it is a moment where it brings them together. Also, YouTube videos. YouTube videos, you can get them in any language. My daughter shares with me a lot of YouTube videos that have to do with either the culture or the language and so forth. So it's another way of sharing communication and their passion or their interest in the language as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Culture. Yeah, learning about, even forget the languages, ask them questions about, what do they eat? What do they wear? What kind of celebrations do they have, right? So there's a lot of conversations.
Especially hand gestures, because some hand gestures are okay in the US, but don't mean that in Europe or in another country. So you have to always be careful.
Very true. So let's go into you leaving the teaching from the classroom. Let's go back to that. And then you had a very strong reason for leaving, and you wanted to start your own business. Now you have a holistic NeuroGrowth learning success coaching practice. So tell me a little bit about why you chose that.
As I said earlier, one of the problems that I was having was not allowing students to learn at their own speed and to feel like I had to kind of get through the curriculum and I had to test it by the end of the semester. And so even though still building the connections with my students was priority. That's my first priority. I came to realize through my years of teaching that I can't teach a student that does not want to be in my classroom. So I need to have students want to be there. And the only way they're going to want to be there is if I have a connection with them so that we know each other, it's a safe place for them, and so forth. But it seemed like 30 students in a classroom, 5 or 6 classes a day. I was doing as much as I could, but I could still feel some falling through my fingers. I couldn't catch them all, and it made me very sad. And so for me, going into coaching is perfect because I'm able to work with students one-on-one. I'm able to go at their speed. I'm able to know them well enough to adapt the content so it's interesting to them and see them flourish, right? Just one at a time. That was the biggest reason for me to going into coaching, is to be able to work with students individually.
Yeah. So for parents who are watching, it's amazing. But for parents who are watching, who signs their kids into these group classes, there's lots of people offering massive Spanish classes, and there's 30, 40 kids on Zoom learning it together. What do you see as a teacher and now a coach? What do you see the problem in that?
Well, I think that the biggest problem with having 30 or 40 kids learning at the same time is the same as they would have in a classroom, but probably even less so, right? Because now they're online and you have 30 kids. How are you going to reach each and every one of them, right? If they're already having problems in the classroom, they need somebody to work with them individually. That's the first one. The second one is a lot of these, they do that so that they can charge a lot less. And so they would be making maybe more than a coach would be making by getting so many students in the same platform, right? But they're not delivering the same kind of service. The other situation with that is that when you're paying somebody to work with your student, even individually, you need to think about, are you paying somebody to do the work for your student, to make sure it just gets done? And are they really learning from that person? So that's another problem with, for example, tutoring. You don't want to be paying somebody to do the work for your student, where your student still doesn't know what they're doing, right? And the third and probably most important one is that when you do that, you don't have somebody who's really interested in the whole student, like I am, right? I would not attempt to go into teaching Spanish until I know what is wrong, what are we missing. I'm not going to teach the same thing that the kid already knows. If they already know that, great, but what is it that's missing? And what has that little piece that's been missing, what has that caused over the years, right? This lack of self-confidence, boredom, not knowing how to study for it, or those are the things that I have to first help them with before they can start even getting back into the language, because we have to change their perception of the class, right? They have to start to want to learn it again in order to be able to learn it. So that's the difference with coaching for me, is really, one, adapting the material to the student, but two, giving the student the tools and the need to want to improve or do better, right?
And also, I think, as a coach, you're also not just looking for the weaknesses and the root causes, but you're also looking for the strength. Each one of us, right? We're born with our own superpowers. Now, in a group class, you'll never expose that. You never figure that out. You're just one person in the crowd. Right?
Absolutely.
So you need those superpowers from the children that we work with, because when we find those superpowers, that's when they get excited too, because they don't sometimes know they have them.
Right. And they're especially good with languages, because in languages, you really are working on the written, the reading, the listening, and the oral production, right? So there are some kids that are going to be great at reading, but maybe not so much at listening. So there are excellent ways that you can work with that. Let's say, for example, it's that first case. Well, then if they can read, but they can't really understand when they listen, well, then you add the audio to whatever they're reading. And so you use the strengths to bring up their weaknesses, right?
Absolutely. So how important is to have a special, personalized and customized attention when learning a language?
Well, I think it's everything. It's the difference between if it's going to work or if it's not going to work. Is it's going to stick? Is a student going to want to continue to learn? If you don't do this, then you're not going to wind up with, a lifelong learner who is going to figure out, oh, I know how I can learn this and I want to learn this, right? You're patching the problem, and the problem is going to persist. And the only way that it's going to go away is when the student decides that they don't want to do this anymore, right? And then it's just frustration for the family as well as the student. And we all know that even though there's ChatGPT and then there's Google Translate and all that, more and more employment ads and so forth ask for a second language. They don't want to know if you can Google a translation. Everybody can do that. They want to know if you can speak to or write an email to their clients. And especially with the United States, the Spanish-speaking population is only increasing. That's a large amount of clients that you would not be able to reach if you don't have a minimum base in Spanish, for example.
So when a child is learning a language, what do you recommend they should focus first? Should they start with the conversation? Do you have a formula? Like, is there a tip we can give parents about that? What should they
Well,
focus
I
on?
do have three different pillars that kind of work together at the same time. I wouldn't say to start with one particular thing. I think that you have to mix it all together because, like you said, talked about the strengths and weaknesses. Some students want to get started speaking right away. Great. Let's do that. And some students are really afraid to speak for a long time. It's even, I mean, we can relate, language learning is very relatable to your first language learning. There are children who don't speak until almost 3 years old. They're not ready. And it's the same way with learning a language. Sometimes it takes some people longer to produce orally because they're just not ready. And other people are just ready to speak right away. So it's important that we mix these together so that they're always going to be growing, even if they're not going to be producing or reading at the same level. But one of the most important things I think that you have to put in right away is making it fun. You have to make it so that when they are learning, there's something funny, there's something humorous, there's a song, there's something that is going to make it stick in a fun way, right? And if you can add it to being culturally as well, that's even better.
And as we talked about earlier, watch shows, like make it more at home, bring it into your family, invite it into your family as well. So if a child, struggles, right? But, for example, we just talked about putting them into tutoring because a lot of parents, that's what they decide to do, when they're struggling in school, they, try to find a tutoring place and, because there's so many options, a lot of the time, as parents, we don't really know what's the best. So when they're looking for a tutor, and when they're putting them together with them, they're thinking they're all equal, but not always. That's one thing, right? And then the second part to that I was going to go over is like the students start struggling. What happens at the end is they give up. Like if you get a situation where you want like your child to succeed and you find a tutor and it's not the right match and they start struggling more, or they're not getting the help they need because they haven't uncovered the problems they're facing,
right?
They tend to give up, because I was one of those people, because when I came to Canada, I didn't know English. So when I didn't get it fast enough, I started shutting down because it wasn't going as fast as I wanted. So as you said earlier, especially some kids shut down the speaking component, right? Like I muted myself completely because I wasn't going to make a mistake and get caught.
Right. And I think that's one of the things that's really important is that when you build this kind of safe place with a student, you want them to make mistakes because we learn from our mistakes, right? And especially with languages, it's okay to make a mistake and we can laugh about it a little bit and then move on and realize that we make mistakes all the time. And with languages, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be perfect to communicate. That really your first and biggest goal is communicating, right? And like I said, again, with communication comes that cultural piece again, because people in different countries don't communicate in the same ways, either through their gestures or through their body language and so forth. You might be killing the communication before you even speak because you already did something that's culturally not correct, right? So there's just so many different aspects to it, and you just have to see what is interesting to the student that's going to grasp their interest for them to want to keep moving forward and not be worried about making any mistakes.
So tell me, Kat, how do you work as a learning success coach, holistic learning success coach? How do you make your learning language easier for students and interesting and funny? You added humor to that, so that must be part of your process as well.
Right. Well, I have, like I said, I have three pillars that work kind of in tandem, right? They kind of support each other. One of them is the recollection and association formula. And this makes learning fun and effortless. It allows students to visualize and appropriate and engage with a new vocabulary or grammar in a fun way that shows them that learning can be fun. So it's ways of learning vocabulary list. It can be done through a song or through a rhyme. Same thing for grammar terms. How am I going to remember when I'm going to use this to be or that to be? Well, there's a acronym that we can use with that, and so forth. So those little different tools that you need to advance in both vocabulary and grammar, right? But then we also, like we have to make that connection so students feel safe. And so the second one of my pillars is understand, empathize, and relate system, which makes students feel heard, right? So when students feel that there's a connection at a personal level, then the communication is going to flow freely and the content is relevant and it's uniquely adapted to them. And so again, this is how the first pillar works. I adapt the content from the first pillar so that it works to that student's needs, right? And what he likes doing. So if a student, for example, really enjoys sports, then I'm gonna try and associate when we're learning and making sentences that have more to do with sports so that it's going to become more interesting for them, or they're going to be able to relate to it right away, right?
Mhm.
And then like we were talking about this cultural portion, then there's my third pillar, which is the international multicultural and inclusive framework, which helps students understand the diverse ways in which people communicate, value, and they do things in other countries, right? That inclusive portion also allows them to feel like they are included in that conversation as well, because my students come from all, walks of life. And so it's important that when you start feeling like you are included, then you are able to include other people and visualize other differences as well, right? When your differences are appreciated or accepted. So, and that way they can gain confidence in their ability to communicate and operate either in different countries or with people from different cultures, because they know that they're aware of how people work, right?
So these pillars all play together in your coaching practice so
That's
that students can have the holistic transformation. Sounds
exactly.
like.
Transformation. That's an amazing word of transformation. That's what
Mhm.
they have to really see when they start working with me is this is where you are at now. We are going to go through a transformation, but a transformation takes time. We're not going to, make you get an A next week. You are going to find out exactly what you need to make this transformation so that you can be successful from here on out, even after you're done working with me.
So give the parents a tip right now about, sometimes as parents, we can be hard on our kids. Like my son is learning, we want him to go faster. Why don't you know the grammar? We have all these expectations as parents. As a coach, I'm different. When it comes to a parent, I'm also different. So,
Right.
tell me as a parent, what kind of mindset should I have when my son or daughter is learning a new language?
Patience is a big one. It's interesting because not too long ago, I posted something on my on social media that talked about probably this transformation and the mindset for parents. And it was this idea of there being two verbs to be in Spanish. And so if there are two ways of saying to be in Spanish, that means that sometimes you're going to use this one, sometimes you're going to use the other one. And it's going to take time to figure out when you're going to use one and when you're going to use the other, right? I'm hoping that parents right now are going, what? How can there be two to be's? How I am is one word. Oh no, it can be 4 different words in Spanish, right? And so the thing that I put on the post was a language can be hard. And so give your student grace on the time it takes to get it, right? And it was interesting because then a lot of my past students did a bunch of likes and follow and said, yes, thank you, because I think that parents don't realize the difficulty that it is for the student. Unless they studied the language themselves, they don't realize that the student is trying, but there are times when it's hard, and it's hard for different students at different times. So give them grace, be patient,
So what is something that your student told you that still remains in your mind? Something that one of your students.
Well, this last one was when it's interesting because it was the one that said, thank you, when it said, thank you, Páez, you're always on our side, was a student who is extremely successful that did that wrote that. Because there's a lot of expectations at home from him, and he always needs to have an A. And when it comes down a little bit, because, learning is a process, then he gets spoken to by parents, and he just felt like by me posting that said, parents, give your students grace. Of course he's an A student. Of course he's going to be fine, but maybe it's not going to be fine all the time, so just just let them work through it. You know, it's important for students to feel the struggle, work through the struggle. And so that would be one of them. And another recent one was I had a student share with me, because I'm still in touch with most of my students through my social networks, right? They either through Instagram, they send me messages, or this reminded of me of you. So I'm very happy, very proud to have built these connections with my students that allow me to continue to work with them. But there's one student who sent me a reel about a song that we learn in class to learn the different countries and capitals in Central America. And they said, I still curse you because now that I heard it again, now it's in my head again, and I'm not going to get rid of it, because they still remember that song, right? And so they know the capitals of the countries in Central America because they can't get this song out of their word. So it was like, curse you, Páez, now I've got it back in my head again, and it's going to take years for it to be gone. So, but they said that, of course, laughing.
Yeah. And that's the thing with students, they always remember the teacher that made them smile, gave them a shortcut or a code, a cheat code, right? And made them learn things in different ways, like not the traditional, read the book, copy it, learn it, tell me what is it, and
memorize
give it to me
the
on
list.
test.
Does never work. Never works.
Never works. So you must have had all these, extra qualities to make learning language come to life, and that's why they're still remembering. And when they see these things remind them of you. So that's beautiful. That's very beautiful. So to wrap up, Kat, I want to ask you, what is actually the difference from learning from you? Because that's a big thing that I think parents have to understand, is learning from a, holistic neurogrowth learning success coach versus hiring a tutor.
I think the biggest difference is having a team player. My biggest passion outside of languages is helping students, empowering them. I've seen so many students feel depressed or feel bad about where they are, that I just don't want that for other kids. And I want to help bring harmony back into those homes. And so when it starts to go south, then the parents are like, well, why didn't you get a better grade on the test, or you didn't study, or then there's going to be this friction between parents and students, when at home they're supposed to be loving and supportive, towards their kids. But of course they want them to do well. And so they feel that by asking them or telling them that they should study more or so forth. So this kind of creates this unhealthy home relationship that I would like to first kind of put a stop to. And I'd like to tell parents, you go back to being mom and dad, or, your guardian, or go back to going out and having fun and laughing over ice cream, and give that, be supportive to your students. Let me take care of that school part, right? Let me email the teacher. Let me find out what's missing, what we need to work on, and I will be that person that works with your student. And I'll build that connection and that trust that they can tell me what's happening, and I can help them get past the struggle that they're having right now. And it might not just be in Spanish. I might be working with students who are not taking Spanish or French or English, but who are just having a hard time getting through school, who need more effective ways of studying or of learning, different tools that they can use. And I can be that person for them. I can be working with students to make them feel better about themselves and want to succeed. And parents can be a little bit relieved knowing that they did do something for their student, they did do something for their child, they got them the help that they needed, and they can go back to being just mom and dad, right?
And you're repairing the relationship, as you said. That's very important.
That's
because
really important.
That's the most important part. And sometimes, education kind of tend to bring us apart because we're not on the same page as our kids get older.
Yes.
Sometimes it get difficult as well. So I am so excited for your journey as a learning success coach. And I want to turn around and ask you a question for a teacher who might be listening. Some of our, listeners are teachers and struggling in the classroom, with the demands and, with the administrators and the politics a little bit. What can you offer as a solution in starting a business, because you're now a business owner? What can you
Mhm.
offer them as an advice?
I think that my biggest advice is to, I think people would say, well, if I were to start my own business, I think that would be so overwhelming. But really what was most overwhelming was when I was in the classroom, trying to accommodate curriculum, administrators, other staff members, students, and so forth. That was just incredibly overwhelming. Starting your own business and going into coaching is not as overwhelming as you might think it is. You know, yes, it's going to take work to get there, but you feel better about yourself. You feel better about doing what you started teaching for, going back to the basics and going back to helping the students and working with them and wanting to see students succeed, right?
Since I know you, I think the word that comes to me while I look at you, going from the United States, now in France, settled now, it's empowerment. It empowered you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
the word that comes to mind. And as teachers, we're not in the classroom.
We're in the business of hoping to empower students, but even then we're lucky if we're able to only do it with a few of the ones that are in the 30 in our classroom.
Yeah, let's talk about that. You know, sometimes when I say, you know, teachers need to have some control, people take that as differently. Like control has different meanings, right? When a teacher doesn't have control over how they can help their students, it's hard because, as you said, so many students can drop through your fingers because you don't have the control to differentiate, slow it down, speed it up for some, right? Tell me a little bit about that control, because that's a big word. Sometimes people misunderstand.
Yeah, well, and I think that there's a lot of different ways in which we have to control the classroom, right? So we are expected to differentiate for students, but it's very difficult when you have 10 different differentiations that you have to do. If you have somebody who's dyslexic and you have somebody who's dysgraphic and you have somebody who has ADHD and somebody who has to take medication. And so imagine, I mean, one parent has just a few kids that they have to remember, you have to take this medication, you have to do this. Imagine a teacher who has to know this about maybe at least 10 students out of 30 in one classroom, you know, so that's one thing that we have to control that is difficult, right? And it's crazy to expect that somebody's going to be able to control that as much, right? So control all the different aspects of all the different students that we have at the same time. And then I think the second one is I have been blessed with not having to have very many problems in terms of discipline in my classroom. I connect well enough with my students that I didn't have those problems. But I think that I know some of my peers who had terrible problems with discipline. And so they have to then control the classroom, right? And so you have to maintain control in the classroom so that you can teach your curriculum, but then you're spending so much more time on controlling the discipline and the classroom management that you're not able to get to the curriculum, and that other students are not getting the instruction that they need. So I think that this word control, when it comes to teachers, it's so big, all the things that we have to be able to control, right? And every parent wants the teacher to see their student. And we do want to, but we want to do that for every student. And it's impossible, right? So when you have a coach, you know that your coach sees your student, right?
So what would you tell a student who might be listening to our show right now about learning a new language? What should they remember?
It takes time, and you have to just throw yourself out there and be willing to have fun with it and make mistakes if you want. But you have to enjoy the ride and ultimately think and keep in the back of your mind, why is it that I'm learning a language? What is my objective? What is my goal? Why am I putting myself through this? You know, is it because I want to travel? Yeah, okay, well, I'm learning Spanish, I'm learning French because I want to travel in Europe, or I want to travel in Latin America. Is it because I want to go in aeronautics, for example? Well, yeah, in Toulouse in France is where they have the other big company where they make the planes, right? It's because I'm really into the United Nations and stuff like that. Well, French is the official language for the United Nations. So what is it that's making you want to take this class? And keep that in mind and allow yourself lots of time, lots of humor. And the more that you enjoy the ride, the faster you're going to get there.
Yeah, it's amazing. I started speaking because I had one teacher who looked into my eyes and
Hmm.
said, I know you can speak, start
Hmm.
speaking. And she
Yeah.
would get me up, my ESL teacher, she would get me up and say, read the sentence. I know you can read it. So
Hmm.
it's that care of someone by your side too, right? Having the right person to be by your side. Because if it wasn't for her, I probably wouldn't have spoken to this day. Because
Right.
she gave me the confidence. She said, I know you can do it.
Hmm.
Because
Good. Yeah.
I was hiding, right? I was hiding because I was afraid of making mistakes. So having the right coach, right teacher,
Hmm.
a mentor is so important while we learn new things, especially language, because we tend to be afraid that someone's going to like laugh at us,
Right.
make fun of
But
us.
and the idea is that you are going to make mistakes, and it is a good thing to make mistakes.
A
And when
mistake.
somebody is with you kind of chuckling or saying, yeah, that was that, yeah, that's what you said. Then it's a game. It's fun to make that mistake, to say what you're going to say, because even if you get it wrong, it's going to be fun. It's going to be funny. It's going to be great. So I have one of my students who wrote one of my testimonials, and that was one of her things. It had to be perfect, and so she would come in and have lunch with me, and I'd have lunch. We would have lunch together, and she would go over this stuff, and then she would say all the things that she wanted to say. She would make the mistakes, and we would laugh together, and I say, you know what you just said, right? And she's like, oh my God, I can't believe I just said that. And we would laugh while we're having lunch, and that's the kind of connection that I want to be able to have with all my students.
It's very important. Now, I want to touch on the last person who might be listening to our show is
Mhm.
administrators. What's your, not feedback, but a request? Because, teachers still are in classrooms. There's many of them are still in the classroom. What can an administrator understand about the teacher side of things?
I think this is difficult. I've had administrators who were supportive and administrators who were less supportive. So it's kind of hard to put it all into one same basket. But I would remind administrators that while it's important to check on the teachers and make sure that they're doing the work correctly, because not everybody is meant to be a teacher, I don't think either, that they also learn to trust the teachers that they've already seen and say, okay, yeah, this person's got it. They're on the road. That's fine, and give them that trust. Also, if they see a teacher that is constantly continuing to better themselves, prepare themselves, get some more certifications, to empower those teachers to move forward, right? To not have the mentality that only certain teachers get to teach certain things or do certain things because of status or privilege of some sort, because that demotivates teachers. Teachers can be motivated and they want to do better, and they get all this training, and they say, I'm gonna be helping these kids do this, and then they'll say, yeah, but no, we're not going to have you teach that. We're not going to have you do that. And then you realize, well, you did all this for nothing, right? So if administrators want to keep good teachers in their classroom, they have to learn to trust them, to validate them, and to empower them, so that they keep the ones that they want in the building, right?
Seen and heard.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Be seen.
Yes.
See the
Be
teachers'
seen
hard
and heard.
work. Yeah. Hear them. Hear their feedback, because they are the one who are in front of the students. So you have to listen to their feedback.
And value them.
Mm.
They need to be valued for the work that they do.
Yeah.
So
And it becomes a team environment rather than pointing fingers. So for this podcast, I always wanted to start when, I'm an educator of 24 years myself, is this, I was in a culture where everybody was pointing their fingers every other way, every other direction, at every other person, except they were not thinking about what are we doing wrong. And in the middle always is our students who get caught, It's either parenting styles and parenting mistakes that we make. We don't make it intentionally, but sometimes we make them. I make them too.
Right.
And then there's administrators who are making some mistakes or misunderstanding, and then the teachers, and then in the middle is the student. So
Right.
as everyone involved, we have to protect our students, because when they feel hurt, when they feel left out, when they feel unseen, right?
Right.
There can be consequences that come from that, and we don't want to damage them because they are the vulnerable people in this equation. So
Absolutely. Yeah. They're the client, right? Whether they're in the school or whether it's coaching, they're ultimately the client. They're the ones that need to receive the education and the results. They have to see the results.
Mhm. I really enjoyed our conversation, Kat, and then
Me
all the
too.
tips you have given us and given each individual different people who can be watching and listening to our podcast. So do you have anything that you want to leave the parents with? Because they will be watching you. So tell us, is there anything you want to tell them?
I think really the most important message that I have is listen, communicate and listen to your children, to your student, if you're a guardian. When the struggles come into place, you may not be, and it's hard for parents to feel this way because I had the same situation, right? We may not be the most apt to help our children, but we can find them the right person to do that, right?
Mhm.
And there are few people that I know in this business who are as committed to working with the student, the person, and seeing them come out the other end as successful lifelong learners than I am, right? Because my first priority is getting students out of that struggle, because I see too many students wanting to give up on a lot more than just school. And I want them to be safe, and I want them to find a place that is safe, a person that they can text at the last minute saying, I'm losing it, what can I do? A person that's going to be their mentor, their guide, that is going to walk alongside with them until they're strong enough to fly on their own, you know? And sometimes parents feel like this is their job, but sometimes we can't do that. The best we can do is find somebody to help us do that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why the helps are available. And I love your pillars. Thank you for sharing. So if you're watching or listening to us, you will have all the details how to contact Kat and see what she shares and what she has to offer. If you're looking for someone, a mentor and a guide for your children to learn Spanish or French.
Or French or English as a second language as well. So,
yes, English, and also AP. You help in AP too, right?
Yes, I'm also IB certified. So I've seen a lot of students get through the IB diploma and get through Spanish and French and get good scores. Yeah.
Amazing. So as you said, language is so important because I think it also empowers your brain. It rewires your brain. So many different networks are formed. So it's a very good critical thinking component to language.
Yes.
Knowledge is so important. One more language at least. So critical.
It does help so much in the other subjects as well, because of your problem solving and your critical thinking, that you just get stronger in other subjects as well.
Yeah, and appreciate culture and other people around the world.
Absolutely.
Yes. Thank you so much, Kat. I'll talk to you later. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
So there you have it. You heard Kat give you some tips on how you can help your child learn the language. So she was talking about, having at home conversations. So important for us as parents to have those conversations, especially as our students or our children get older and older. As I said, they tend to build this wall telling us to stay away. Even I have a 16-year-old does the same thing, stay away from his wall. But we as parents, we need to make sure that they don't build the wall. We can give them privacy, they can have their downtime, but as they're learning a language, especially my son is learning Spanish right now, I want to be involved. I want to ask him questions and watch shows, watch, as Kat said, watch series that you can put the subtitle and you can watch the language, you can learn about the culture. So important, such a great tip. And you also heard today from Kat why she left the classroom. As a teacher, she didn't have that space to give the students what they needed and differentiate and give the attention your child needs. So she now is a holistic neurogrowth learning success coach, and she offers this mentorship and guidance to students. So you heard how important it is to not put your students in with the tutor or into a group setting where they are getting the same or worse education than they would have in the classroom, because a lot of these tutors are doing this as a business to have so many students online on a Zoom room. Is not an environment where your child can thrive. So when you're putting a child into a format like that, what's going to happen is that they're going to quickly give up because they're going to feel like I'm not capable. We don't want our children ever to feel that they're not capable, because every one of our children are capable if they're given the right guidance and the right environment. So we really want to foster that. So when you're choosing the next tutor or when you're choosing a program, look at what they're offering, look at the individual attention they're going to give your child and the customization and personalization. So these are 3 things that you want to really watch out when you're hiring someone, and look at their background and look at the personality they have, because your child is going to spend time with these people. So you want to also study their personality so that you can trust your children with the tutors or whoever, find to help your child. So that's why as a learning success coach, all of our coaches are certified. So when they're certified, and also they're certified teachers as well. So you can trust your child with them because they're not in it for the money, they're in it for the transformation. For every one of us and our coaches, it's really important to see a child as one person and give them the attention they deserve and the customization and the uniqueness they have. We want to bring out, as we talked about, it's not always about the weaknesses that we want to focus on. We want to find your child's superpower. Even as a parent, look for their superpower, bring that to life and see your relationship change with your child as well. The last thing I want to touch on is that we talked about how in the school system it's now hard for students to learn because there's a lot of changes happening. There's a lot of blames. People tend to blame each other in the school system. And in the middle, a lot of the time, your child gets in the middle and caught, and that just leaves the child very vulnerable for a lot of things. So that's why we want to protect them. We want to give some guidance at home, be the guidance, be the person that you can listen and talk to them on a daily basis. Having a conversation like Kat said, go for a walk, because if you sit in front and talk to your child, sometimes they will shut down, especially if they get to be in the teenage years. But if you go walking side by side and have a conversation, that might allow you to have greater deep conversations with your child as well. Or go for a coffee, watch a movie, have fun. Make sure not to make it too much pressure to learn a language, because they do need the grace, as she said, and the patience, and allow them the time that they need as an individual child to learn. When you put all of this together, you're going to have a son or daughter who's going to flourish and be successful in learning French, English, whatever subject, whatever language they're trying to learn. I hope this episode was helpful for you, all of you who are listening to this, because we really want to bring all the sides of the people that are involved in your child's learning and education. And we want to explore different perspectives and how each person feels in this equation. But at the end of the day, as I always say, the most important person is the student, the child, your children who are in the middle, we have to protect. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in another episode.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Our purpose for this episode was to spark a reevaluation of the current education system. For more episodes offering practical and comprehensive strategies to enhance learning, please visit www.learningsuccessacademy.com. It is crucial to ensure that children have access to the holistic neurogrowth learning approach, enabling them to break free from the constraints of an outdated educational framework. This is your opportunity to gain insight and break away from a flawed system, setting your children on a path to lifelong success that truly nurtures their thirst for knowledge. That's all for now. We look forward to having you join us for the next episode.